Hey there everyone, my name is Nicholas Ugero, and I am unfortunately going to have to re-record this video. The one that I did before had an audio delay and I was going to let it slide, but just rewatching it just frustrated me, so I'm just going to go over it again. The video is going to be about why I believe gardening to be so important, and one of the main reasons is that it's one of the most defiant actions that you can take as an individual. And for me personally, I have been doing investing in silver. I've also been doing my own organic products, but when it came to doing the gardening, I think that was probably the biggest change and the biggest disruptor that I found to be. All three of them are phenomenal actions that you can take, but I think gardening to be one of the most important, especially since our food system is based on dependency and control. And you can look at the grocery stores as a perfect example. We're all relying on the grocery stores for our food and our products and almost everything that we can imagine. And we're always hoping that they're not going to be closed or the things that we want are going to be there when we need them. And we're usually not stockpiling anything at home, so we only have like a week's worth of food or a couple of days worth of food, and so it's very much on dependency and control. And then when you also think about the selection of food that we have at the stores, and when you consider that there's hundreds of fruits and vegetables out there that aren't in the stores, our selection is very, very limited and narrowed. So when it comes to like getting the proper nutrition and vitamins and minerals, you're most likely going to have to take supplements unless you can find different stores that have different produce in the stores. So it really limits our choices, and like if we have to depend on the supply line, and there's only a couple people that are main people that are producing food and selling food, and then there's all of us down here, hundreds of thousands of people. If there's one big kink in the whole chain, it can have a rippling effect and affect a lot of people all at the same time. So if there was more people that were gardening, just local people that are just living at home and communities and things like that, if we just had more gardens and we're gardening, we had our own food that we can rely on as well, then if there was some disruption in any sort of way, like when it comes to weather or anything like that, then we'll be a lot more resilient. And so not only that, but the food in the majority of the stores is not fresh at all. And thinking about having to ship strawberries across the country or mushrooms across the world or anything, a huge distance just to reach local stores, it seems very backwards. It doesn't make a lot of sense, considering that we can grow things and have them just be picked off right then and there and put on our plate, instead of having to use all the energy and all the resources just to get a certain crop over to us for consumption. And with the lack of freshness comes the losing of nutrients and the losing of good taste too. And once it hits like the 24-hour mark of being harvested, it automatically starts losing nutrients depending on the circumstances and the environment it's in. Maybe it'll quicken depending on the environment it's in, but it's very, very unfortunate. And so we have kids that are going to be eating vegetables that we get from the stores, and I can't really fault them for not liking it, or some of them, because they're not at the peak freshness and they're not grown with the things that it needs to have in the soil in order for the taste to be there and the nutrients to be there. And that's another thing, that's what I'm going to lead into right now. The way that our food is grown is mostly based on yield and not the quality and the nutrients and things like that. And when it comes to the agricultural industry in itself, they just want to get as much produce as possible, and they want to make it with as least overhead, so doesn't cost that much. And so they don't put the things in the soil that are needed. When plants are growing and things like that, they absorb things from the soil itself. And so if you're not remineralizing the soil or putting more nutrients in the soil, or if you don't have that stuff in there to begin with, then the plants are going to be more susceptible to weather conditions that change rapidly, or insects. And when it comes to nutrition and things like that, it's not going to produce as much too. And so if you look at green peppers and jalapenos, green peppers, they're actually unripened red, yellow, or orange tomato or peppers. And then when you look at jalapenos, I never even knew this until recently, but jalapenos are red. They're naturally supposed to be red when they're ripe. And so what they do is they pick them when they're not ripe, which will allow the plant to produce more, but each jalapeno is not going to have the same nutrients or the same flavor as one that if you waited. So if it turned red, then you picked it and you had a green and a red one, yeah, you'll still be eating a jalapeno, but this one has a lot more nutrients and it tastes better and it's hotter and it's got all these other benefits to it, and then this one doesn't have nearly as much. And so they take shortcuts. So they don't put the things in the soil that's needed for nutrients and taste. They pluck things out when they're too young, and then when it comes to the chemical industry, they almost can work hand in hand. A lot of these companies work with Monsanto or Bayer and Ortho, and they create GMO products, which are genetically modified products. So if you have a seed and then they genetically modify it, they put a trait from something else that's nowhere even close to the same thing, and they inject it into this. They want you to believe that they're so precise with it that they can just replace one gene with something else, and it's not going to disrupt anything else. When in fact, it has a rippling effect, and it can affect many different systems within that. Genetically can affect a lot of things. And so it has a lot of side effects that we don't really know of or can really conceive of unless we're eating it for a long, long time, and then we can see the effects at that time, which is not a good way to have it. And when it comes to the chemicals they make, and when they're not putting the right things in the soil, then your plants are more they can get affected by pests a lot easier. So then it gives them the excuse or the reason to come up with kind of like the chemicals, like the Roundup or the pesticides and herbicides. And so we have a problem, one of the main problems, which is like the insects. And then we get their solution, which is the chemical solution, the Roundups and all that other stuff. But they fail to really mention or point out all these other solutions that are out there, that are natural, that we can do ourselves. So when it comes to weed killing, you can just get a bottle. You can fill it with vinegar, soap, and salt. I'm not sure what the ratio is. I'd have to look that up. But you can have all those three things, mix it up, and spray weeds. And you can kill weeds effectively. And that's a homemade solution that you can do that's not going to have 30 chemicals. It's not going to have glyphosate in it, which is a known carcinogen for humans. And then you don't have to buy their product. And that's the thing. They have the advertisements there just so you think, oh, this is, they did all the research. They've done a lot of funding. These are experts. They know what they're doing. This is probably the best solution out there. That's why it's being pushed in society. It must be the best. So I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to really think of anything else and not look up anything. And so that's one of the main issues, is that some people have good intentions when they're buying these things, but they just don't do some due diligence and looking up other solutions that are possibly out there to solve the same problem that they're trying to solve, the companies, the corporations. And so that's one of the main things I'm getting at, is just the corporations that are involved when it comes to the grocery stores, when it comes to the food production industry, when it comes to the chemical industry, when it comes to the science industry, when it comes to like the genetically modified foods. And it's all about centralizing things. And then they make decisions and they give us the foods and that we have to choose from. And all of these people get affected, and we're a lot more than they are. So their decisions and their actions and what they push out in society affects a lot of people. And so we have to be quite aware of that. And so with me personally, when it comes to these GMOs and the chemicals, last year when I did my first gardening ever, I proved to myself that those things are not needed at all. I didn't have a single GMO crop. All of them were organic. They were naturally produced. And I didn't use a single chemical. There actually is another solution to like insecticides, but it's natural. There's something called neem oil, and it comes from the neem tree that's in India. And every year or so, there's locusts that come through and they eat all the vegetation. They eat the grass, they eat the bushes, they eat the leaves, but they do not touch the leaves on this tree. And it turns out that there's oils in there that are toxic to them. It will kill these insects. And so they actually have been able to concentrate it, making it into an oil. And ironically, I have a Roundup sprayer. I don't put Roundup in it, but you put a certain amount of neem oil, you put dechlorinated water, and then I put Dr. Bronner's Sal Sud soap, And what that does, it helps incorporate the oil with the water so it doesn't stay separated. Because if you just mix it up, it's just going to end up separating anyway. So it helps combine it all. And that's basically as a last resort, but it is a natural solution. That does work. And when it came to like the soil, like I was talking about with the industries, and they don't put the right stuff in there, I started learning and I started putting things in there. I started changing my habits. I started growing my consciousness when it came to gardening techniques and things you can put in the soil. And so that alone made it to where I didn't even need to put the neem oil on anymore, because I had insect pressures at first. And I was really worried that thinking my crops were going to die from bugs attacking it too much and then them killing it. But me just putting the right things in the soil, me changing the water I was using, I'm using dechlorinated water now instead of chlorinated, and that alone made a difference. But putting all these things in there helps strengthen your plant. It can make it more disease resistant. So like fungus diseases, they don't, like the powdery white mildew stuff, like you don't get, I never got any of that. My plants were super healthy, super strong. They were insect resistant, and they were good when it came to like weather changes, or if it got really, really hot. The soil was able to maintain moisture and keep it in there longer. So you didn't need to water as much. It saved water and cash. And then when it comes to the yields and things like that, I was able to produce a lot. And if the winter didn't come when it came, I had a lot more life that I had in those plants. I could have gotten a lot more yield from them. And then also the nutrients that were in my plants were also phenomenal. So it was a win-win-win. And there's also so many other solutions when it comes to insects. Like, I didn't realize this until looking it up, but there's actually a way that you can have your plant that you want to keep protected, and then you can plant a sacrificial plant right next to it or in the vicinity of it. And so this one is going to attract bad bugs, and all the bad bugs will come to this plant, which you're not really concerned about. You're concerned about this one. And so all the bad bugs being on this one will actually encourage good bugs to come and eat those. So not only will you save your plant from getting insects on it in the first place, but then this other plant is going to bring good bugs over to your plants and then help protect them even more for the future. And then so teaming with nature is one of the best things you can possibly do. And that's what these GMOs and chemicals are the antithesis of, the exact opposite of. They're harnessing science, like bogus science. Like, I don't believe in this stuff at all. Like, all the side effects of all of these chemicals and then the GMOs, it's not natural at all. And it's not something that I would ever encourage anyone to do in any vicinity. And we can grow our own chemical-free food with more yield, more nutrients, and pest resistant. That's the gist of the whole thing. Gardening helps reconnect us with nature. And so using nature, like teaming up with it, which is what I learned in this book, Teaming with Microbes, it's one of the best things you can possibly do, because you have thousands and millions and billions of microbes and bacteria and fungus and protozoa that you can work in tandem with. Put those things in your soil, put things that are naturally found in soil, and have them just do the work for you. They'll protect your plant. They'll make it healthy. When you look at an old forest, we had no part to play in that. Just nature has its own methods, and it's all a food soil web. Everything is interconnected. One system, it affects another systems or helps another couple systems grow and multiply and thrive. And just learning more about that stuff, it makes your job a lot easier. You don't have to worry about the pests. You don't have to worry about a bunch of other things. And so it made my experience a lot easier from when I first started to when I was ending. When I was ending, I was doing amazing. I didn't have to use any of that neem oil. I was just continually adding things on the surface of my soil. There's also something called compost tea, which I'm going to be making at some point once gardening starts. The season starts coming up, and I'll do a video on that, but it's super easy. There's a bunch of things you can put in that compost tea recipe, which is basically just a big couple gallons of water, and you can put it on your leaves, on your stems, into your soil, and it's like a powerhouse. It literally makes your growth go crazy, and it's super exciting seeing the results. And so reconnecting with nature is not only therapeutic, but then it's also helping you respect nature, and then using natural methods, you'll be able to see in society how disconnected a lot of people are, and a lot of these companies are, and then you can choose to not support them, which is something I'm doing. I'm not supporting these chemicals when it comes to my products, when it comes to my gardening supplies, when it comes to anything. I try to avoid them as much as I can, just because I've learned. And you make different decisions based on what you know. And sometimes you can learn a lot, but then if you don't apply it, then you might as well not even know it. So in my opinion, applying your knowledge, that is real power, not just knowledge in itself. There's a difference between being intellectual and being wise. And so I try to put my things into action as best I can. I still got a long way to go in that regard, but gardening can also expand your creativity, which is super important. There's no one-size-fits-all way of gardening. You can have container gardening, you can have raised bed gardening, you can have aquaponics, you can have hydroponics, you can have towers, you can have growth towers where they just sprout out the sides and things like that. You can have water gardens where you have like ponds with fish and stuff like that, and you can have different things around there, and the sky's the limit. And so when it comes to especially kids, it's one of the best avenues to put them into, because it definitely helps the brain, helps them figure out things and come up with different ideas, because there's no real bad or ideas out there. There's always trial and error. Like for me, I killed a lot of plants when I first started. I didn't even know how to transplant them. I was so ignorant. But I kept growing, I kept learning, and it was a really good process for me. And so I was able to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to start doing this and see how that works. So it can definitely be accomplishing. You get a real sense of accomplishment when it comes to doing gardening. When I first started, I thought I was going to get burned out from it. At first I was like really, really excited. I was learning a couple things and seeing how it's a really good way of decoupling from corporations and the centralized nature of everything. But when I first started, I was like, I think I might get burned out and I may stop and I may not find the drive to keep going. But thankfully, I kept learning, and I didn't just stick with what I knew. I kept trying to look up things, watching videos. This YouTube channel, Growing Your Greens, was a phenomenal resource, and he put me in a bunch of good directions, saved me a bunch of mistakes that I probably would have made. And I was able to exponentially increase my experience and my success, and I didn't kill any other plant after my initial planting of them. I became very, very good at gardening, and even so, I have a lot more to learn. Like I said in my other video about the video for all the kids in public school, I'm a student of learning. So when it comes to anything, I know that I'm not a pro, and I know that even the pros, they're still learning, they're still growing. It's a lifelong process. So it's very fulfilling being able to do stuff, especially with gardening. The responsibility aspect is very, very key. And it teaches kids how to be responsible. Make sure you water the plants, you take care of them, you make sure the things that are in the soil are in the soil. Try to see the layout of everything. Are there potential predators that are around? Are there going to be rabbits and snakes and slugs and squirrels that are going to come and eat your stuff while you're away or while it's nighttime? And so it helps them have a sense of responsibility, being on top of something, and that's where the accomplishment also kind of comes in together. And for me, like waking up every single morning and coming downstairs and opening up the door and seeing how my plants have changed, or are they doing better now than yesterday? It was so exciting, and it's such a fulfilling thing to be a part of that. Like being in that whole process of seeing, like, for instance, my okra plant being like this big and then becoming like 3 feet tall and producing a bunch of delicious okras that I was able to cook up and things like that. And gardening helps the environment too. Most definitely, it helps you respect nature and try to do better. Like for me, I started picking up trash around my neighborhood. I got one of those extending grabbers. I had a bucket. I was going around and things like that. I'm definitely going to be doing that soon, now that it's getting a little bit better out. But it definitely makes you really question, like, when it comes to like the paper industry, like, why are we using paper when it's such a, like, we're cutting down trees that are like decades old, and then we have to replant new ones, which will take a long, long time to really establish and help the environment. When we have things like hemp, which of course are illegal, and you can have 3 life cycles of those things. You can have it grow up, you can cut it down and use it for paper, which is, hemp is like the strongest fiber there is. And we used to have, the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. It's one of the best things you can possibly use when it comes to rope and paper and a lot of things. It has a lot of different utility aspects. You can have it with water bottles, so they're biodegradable. And so you can have 3 life cycles of hemp plants in one season, and they'll produce a lot for paper, instead of us having to cut down trees that are very, very well established in that ecosystem. And we're affecting a lot of biology, and we're affecting the food soil web in tremendous ways, in extremely negative ways that we can't even really perceive of unless we know about that. And so for me, it's very, very disheartening to see something like that. But gardening can help with people seeing how important it is to really respect nature and work in tandem with it, and not just exploit it for our own benefits. That's pretty egotistical in my perspective, us as humans doing things like that. Gardening is very, very empowering. It's a super invaluable skill. It's something that some people are starting to learn more about, but it's still not even close to a majority of the population, which is very unfortunate, and I hope that it does start changing, because it can help with building community and resilience, like I was talking about in the beginning of the video. So if like a supply chain drops down, but we're all gardening, it makes it to where we don't get as affected. We're not as dependent. We're more self-sufficient. We can maybe have dependency on maybe a neighbor and work with neighbors and trade goods, and like, hey, I'm going to grow tomatoes, you grow peppers, and we can swap and things like that. Or just inspiring others as well, so inspiring others in your neighborhood. Something that I'm thinking about doing is this year when I start growing, I'm going to be growing more food, and I'm going to maybe pick some stuff and go door to door and say, hey, would you like some of my oregano or my thyme, or have a couple tomatoes and put it in your dish today, and let me know how it is. And then I can talk to them if they're kind of hesitant and let them know about how I garden. Maybe bring them over sometime and show them, hey, I'm not putting any chemicals on this stuff. My water is great. I put a lot of good stuff in the soil, so it's got a lot of nutrients. And you can really reach a lot of people and give them a real fire in their chest, to really maybe try doing this one day. Just doing one plant this year would be a phenomenal step. One is better than none. And when it comes to herbs, they're super, super easy. They're probably one of the best beginner plants I could really think of. I had my oregano. I brought that in during the winter. I didn't water it anymore. I was expecting it to die really quick. It took well over a month for it to finally die. It's a very, very hardy plant. So I would definitely recommend oregano. Very, very resilient. And one of the most important things with gardening is that it encourages kids to eat fruits and vegetables. One of the most important things. And that goes hand in hand with the whole connecting us with nature. If they're not connected with what they're eating at all, then they'll just eat anything. They'll eat stuff that's in a bag or in a box. Something that you put in the microwave that's frozen, and you just heat it up for 5 minutes and eat it. And we've become so addicted to high salt diets and high sugar diets that when it comes to just eating like maybe like a thing of peas like right off the vine, it might seem very outlandish and kind of off-putting to most people. But if people are connected in that process and seeing things grow, they'll be more willing to eat that stuff. And like this gentleman Ron Finley has said in one of his TED Talks, kids who grow kale eat kale. And that is so very true. If we're not connected with what we're doing and what we're eating and putting in our bodies, or when it comes to my products, making my own organic products, like I'm connected in that process. So it makes me willing to go that extra mile and always try to use this and try to avoid the chemical stuff, because I know the difference. I know that there's a problem and there's a solution, but there's natural ones out there, and they're always going to be better, in my opinion. Always going to be better. And so if you have any children or anything like that, please try to make a garden this year. Just one plant. That's all I could ever ask, and it could most likely be a life-changing experience for you. Because I was hesitant at first when I first started, but now that I look back, I'm so glad that I kept going with it and kept learning, and I'm still going to be learning. I'm going to read another book coming up really, really soon. And so that's going to be the end of this video. I really appreciate it if you guys watched it till the end. It really means a whole lot to me. I'm going to keep making videos. I'm going to be doing a lot of gardening this year, so I'm going to make a lot of videos on that. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.